Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, Jacksonville recorded the highest number of commercial sex ads in the entire state. We look at what's being done to disrupt sex trafficking on the First Coast. Then, improv comedy on the First Coast? We say yes, and we talk to the founders of Jacksonville's first ever brick and mortar improv club. And how old is sunlight? Our resident spaceman says by the time it reaches Earth, it's pretty ancient, despite the speed of light. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org, where you can find all the ways you can connect with us and also sign up for our new daily newsletter. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, held a press conference last hour in Minneapolis. He says he's talked with several Minnesota state and local leaders. President Trump deployed Homan after federal immigration agents shot and killed a second Minneapolis protester last weekend. Homan says he's there to uphold Trump's immigration policy, but he says there are going to be some changes.
The mission is going to improve because of the changes we're making internally. No agency or organization is perfect. President Trump and I, along with others in the administration, have recognized that certain improvements could and should be made. That's exactly what I'm doing here.
But Homan says any withdrawal of federal troops on the ground in Minnesota will depend on cooperation from Minnesota authorities. FBI agents have searched an elections office in Georgia. One local Georgia official who was inside the Fulton County office yesterday says FBI agents were seizing ballots from the 2020 presidential election. Georgia's been at the center of President Trump's false claims the election was stolen from him. He repeated the lie this morning online. NPR's Stephen Fowler reports this is the latest salvo in the ongoing fight over baseless claims of election rigging in 2020.
The FBI wouldn't answer NPR's questions about the search warrant for the Fulton County elections warehouse outside of Atlanta. But Georgia's most populous county has been the subject of baseless claims of election fraud since 2020. Last month, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit seeking to gain access to Fulton County's ballots. And a state court judge recently allowed the Republican majority state election board to move forward with a subpoena for 2020 documents, too. This as the DOJ has sued 25 states, including Georgia, seeking access to unredacted copies of their voter rolls. Stephen Fowler, NPR News, Atlanta.
For months, the Trump administration has offered little information on how much the president's National Guard deployments in American cities have cost taxpayers. But as NPR's Juliana Kim reports, congressional budget analysts now say these operations are on pace to surpass $1 billion this year.
Last year, it cost more than $500 million to pay for President Trump's domestic troop deployments. It could be double that this year if current operations remain in place. The use of troops in Washington, D.C. alone could cost $660 million. That's according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. It's a tiny fraction in the country's trillion-dollar defense budget, but state leaders and government watchdog groups argue that these deployments aren't a good use of taxpayer dollars. The White House did not respond to a request for comment, but Trump has repeatedly defended the use of troops and suggested sending them to more cities. Juliana Kim, NPR News.
On Wall Street and pre-market trading, Dow futures are up slightly. You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is now 9:04. Intuition Ale Works is closing its downtown pub, beer hall, and brewery in April after attempts to sell it failed. Owner Ben Davis posted the news on the Intuition Facebook page, saying he had hoped the right buyer with the resources and conviction to carry it forward would come along during the past 9 months, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. Intuition opened 15 years ago in Riverside, then moved to its current location on the corner of East Bay Street and A. Philip Randolph Boulevard in 2016, converting the building there into a tap room, brewery, and music venue. The operation's final day will be April 24th, with its last beer hall show featuring the Yonder Mountain String Band. The tap room and kitchen will remain fully open until then. A community meeting is scheduled today to discuss the proposed redesign of the Brentwood Branch Library. The meeting will be held at 5:30 p.m. at KIPP Voice Academy on Gulf Air Boulevard. Residents can share ideas and help create a vision for the future library to make sure it meets their needs. Library officials and the designers will set up design displays so residents can give feedback on the project. Highs reach the 60s inland in northeast Florida today and mid-50s along the coast. A weak low pressure system will develop over the central Gulf and move across the state tomorrow. That low will bring rain from late in the day tomorrow through Saturday night. Highs in the low to mid 60s tomorrow. Colder air on Saturday. Highs in the low 50s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts, sharing about the state of housing in America on the After the Fact podcast. Available at pewtrusts.org/afterthefact, and the Doris Duke Foundation.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, disrupting demand for sex trafficking. With Jacksonville leading the state in commercial sex solicitations, we talked to two experts and a survivor about what works, what doesn't, and how sports leagues are stepping up to help. Later in the program, a local couple starts the city's first ever improv club. We ask them about making it up as they go along. But first, with more than 58,000 documented commercial sex ads in 2024, Jacksonville is by far the state's most active market for solicitations. Experts say the figure demonstrates a, quote, severe localized demand for commercial sexual exploitation. Here to talk about stemming that demand, we are joined by Ruby Peters, human trafficking educator with Catholic Charities Bureau Incorporated with the Diocese of St. Augustine. Good morning, Ruby.
Good morning.
Kristin Keen, founder and chief executive officer of Rethreaded. Good morning, Kristin.
Good morning.
And joining us via video is Jamie Roseland, advocate and member resource manager with Arise Together. Jamie, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Great. Kristin, I wanted you to sort of explain the math on this because I talked about how Jacksonville leads the state on sex ads, but it doesn't lead in sex trafficking per se. Can you help us understand what those two seemingly disparate bits of information mean? Are people being advertised, trafficked elsewhere? What's happening there?
Well, there could be multiple different reasons. Like that, I think that USF are the experts in these numbers, but it could be that the traffickers are putting out lots and lots and lots and lots of ads, and they're not getting a response. Like this is the number of ads in our thing. This could have been around, the ads could have been placed around a major sporting event. Like there's lots of different reasons, but what I hope it would show is that the demand is why human trafficking exists. Mm-hmm. And there is a demand in Jacksonville to buy people. And if we don't curb that and figure out how to decrease that, we're still going to see the numbers rise of human trafficking.
And you have, in a report that you produced at Rethreaded, this graphic that shows Jacksonville compared to the rest of the state, and it really is quite shocking to look at. I'm going to ask our director to put up actually a different image for the people who are watching online. It's kind of a bar graph, right? And so it shows Jacksonville, almost 60,000. The next closest, Orlando, just almost around 20,000. And then after that, Tampa with less, Pensacola, Tallahassee, Miami, some people might be surprised, way down that list. And so Jacksonville is really an outlier in this. And Ruby, to Kristin's point, I mean, these are lives that we're talking about. These are individual people that are being advertised.
They are. And my main role is in education. So I go talk to schools. I talk to scout troops, youth groups, all kinds of young people, especially to send the message that, number one, you don't know what level of consent that person that you're buying is. And number two, to disrupt the boys will be boys kind of attitude, because that's not a mentality that we think is useful.
It's not very helpful.
No.
How would you say progress is on sort of changing that mentality? Where does it come from? Is it still as reinforced as perhaps it once was?
I don't know if there's a way to measure that. We talk to students all the time about online enticement is huge right now, and so what I'm doing is trying to. My motivation is a 17-year-old survivor of sex trafficking that said, "How did I not know about this? Why didn't someone tell me? If I had known, I would have never fallen into this." So I let young people, especially, but adults too. I talk to a lot of church groups, and as I said, anybody who will stand still long enough to listen about human trafficking, and whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. We have a lot of labor trafficking in the state of Florida. So just to educate them in general, and that serves two purposes. One, to hopefully prevent a young person, especially, but even older people online is kind of a sad thing right now. And so that they don't fall into the promises of traffickers, and then as well as to educate people to what to look for so that they could call and report a situation, even if it's just a gut feeling. We tell people, if you see something, to say something.
And can I just that graph that we put up, that was put on by USF. The DeSantis actually got funding for the first time to do statewide research on trafficking in our state. So this is the first time we've really ever looked at demand. We have always known it, like we're in this work and we know it, but that was the first time that we've ever had numbers to show the demand.
Were you surprised by Jacksonville's numbers compared to other places?
I mean, yeah, it was a pretty big disparity. And we've been doing our own research. There's a group of us that have been running some numbers, and the numbers keep coming back so disturbing. Like there's an amazing organization here, the Epic Project. They're doing amazing work in demand disruption. They put out a fake ad during a non-major sporting event. They didn't advertise it at all. So it goes, it's one of 500. It goes to the top, and within 3 hours, it falls down to the bottom.
Where's it advertised?
Just online, on where sex is being bought.
Okay.
And there was like 132 purchase attempts. So like there is a massive amount of a demand here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the first time that we ever have had numbers.
Jamie, I want to bring you into the conversation because I think one thing that is often shocking to many is that people are trafficked not by strangers in most cases. This is not something, as many people I think often think, people who are kind of kidnapped or held captive in the traditional sense. But these are boyfriends, very often relatives, family members, people that the victims trust and are close to. And the numbers show that, almost 40% of people are trafficked by a romantic partner and 45% trafficked by a family member. Getting interceding in there when the vulnerability is so obvious, it seems like it would be just a really tall order. Can you talk about what you encounter in your work and in your experience in terms of, how those familial bonds or those romantic and relationship bonds complicate trying to extricate people from trafficking?
Yeah, I think, people like to think of trafficking as something that happens kind of like far away from them and that they're not like directly or indirectly responsible for. And really, trafficking happens in community. And so, that means that there's people in these victims and survivors' lives who are seeing signs, are seeing these relationships, they're seeing things go on with families, and they don't know what to do. I don't want to make villains out of, everybody in society. But it's not this isolated thing. It's something that definitely happens in the context of community. And then I think the statistics that you said was like 40% like Romeo pimp, like a boyfriend, and like 45% familial. I definitely see that in my work, but now you're talking about 95% of people are being sex trafficked by someone they know. And traffickers are specifically going after, vulnerabilities that they see in these people. And there's nothing inherently bad about being vulnerable. But we don't have the social safety nets that we need. And so, as there's this community that sees the trafficking happen, this community that is okay with men buying sex, and that's prolific when you think about strip clubs, when you think about video games, when you think about music, you think about all these different ways where women are objectified. And, you know, movies like Pretty Woman and just all this stuff where we're sending out the message loud and clear, it's okay to buy sex to men. You know, so there's a community that's allowing and complicit in men buying sex. How do we become a community that says no? Like, we're not okay with people being trafficked. We're not okay with men buying sex. And we need to create a community where we have these social safety nets so people have less vulnerabilities. And whether that's them as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, whether that's them being in it right now or just getting out of trafficking, but even you know, survivors who've been out of life for a long time still need support. And that's what Arise Together is doing to build that community for survivors.
When it comes to demand disruption, Ruby, one of the things that we've seen locally is an effort to involve some places where people are known to be being trafficked. You know, there's been an effort in recent years to put up signs in restrooms, for instance, where in women's restrooms primarily, where women could be reached if they're in trouble, if they want to reach out, if they feel like they're in danger, ways for them to do so safely. But now there's this movement to put those same kind of similar signage in men's rooms. And for people who are watching online, we have a graphic up that shows something that is locally being placed in men's
and those
restrooms.
Kristin can address, because those are brand new this past season.
Okay.
And a great accomplishment.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that partnership. I mean, first of all,
it's a great partnership.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that there's some initial resistance on some level. You've got the state of Florida, which is a huge tourism destination. It's not something that people in the world of promoting Florida love to advertise or to acknowledge. The world of sports hasn't been really keen on embracing the connection, but we know there is one. And so talk about trying to bridge that gap. What has been a successful approach?
Well, a lot of people don't know what it is. So they're afraid that if they talk about human trafficking, that they're going to make people in Florida or people who attend the games afraid of kidnapping, right? And that is not what it is. So that is what me, Ruby, Jamie, we've spent the years and years education. This is what it is. This is what it is. And what has really worked is addressing, like, this is a crime that happens. And this crime increases during sporting events. This crime increases when there's large groups of men coming to one area. And it happens when there's no accountability on the buyer end, that there's no consequence for buying. So we're trying to address all of that. And then there's this aspect of a man's journey to buying is broken. A woman's journey to being sold is broken. How do we bring restoration and accountability on both ends, right? So this signage that we have developed was developed by Epic, who are experts in meeting men where they're at when they're buying, to try to intervene, right? If you need help, because the stat is like almost 70% of men buying sex want to stop, and they don't know how. So how do we equip them to stop? Yeah, and so that is what Epic is doing. So there's the cultural, like, it's okay to do this, and then there's brokenness of the person doing it, and how do we meet people where they're at? And there's accountability. Again, you are committing a crime when you are doing this, when you are purchasing sex, and you are driving the industry of trafficking, and how do we hold you accountable? Like, it's a misdemeanor, right? There's no fine. So it's just a slap on the wrist, right?
I mean, not to get too in the weeds here, Ruby, but if men, 70% of them are saying that they, want to stop, why don't they stop? I mean, what's the compulsion? It doesn't seem like it would be, is it a behavioral addiction? I mean, what's going on there if somebody wanted to stop?
Part of it is a societal expectation, and as they've already indicated, it's okay with that. Some people, it's been if it's a familial thing, then those kids have grown up with that, and so that's it's the norm in their house. So we're just talking about what we can raise our sons and young people to think about the respect of another human being. male or female.
And I know Jamie can really speak to this. She works closely with Epic, and I know she has a lot, of expertise on this.
Jamie, do you want to address that in terms of the demand and why perhaps, men that are interested, and we're saying men, it's obviously this is not just a completely gendered issue, but, if men are interested in not paying for sex or engaging in trafficking, what prevents them from stopping?
Yeah, I just over this weekend, I had the opportunity to be with the EPIC project as they were training 2 new teams to do operations in both Jacksonville and Orlando. And some of the things that they have found in their research is a lot of men, we talk about this like brokenness, and we talk about, this male loneliness epidemic, right? Where they are feeling insecure in their ability to provide, insecure in their relationships. They don't feel like they're getting what they need and deserve. And so, sex buying, is on this continuum of, people aren't, starting with, going out to buy a person on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. People, it starts off with, watching porn, and then it, escalate, and this is not everybody's path, but it is, certainly where things can lead, and then to watching something more extreme, and then feeling like, the watching isn't enough. Now I need to be doing. And so then they, go out to buy sex. So it's this escalation of behavior that happens over time. And then, yeah, the EPIC project research shows that, most men don't want to be buying sex. And, I think it operates a lot like an addiction. I think there's definitely like outliers, where there's men who are prolific in this and extremely violent, and they might have different motives. But for the bulk of people buying sex, this is something they don't want to be doing, and they don't know how to stop.
Well, Kristin, I want to ask you about that, because if we're talking about demand disruption, we're saying that this huge portion of men don't want to be doing what they're doing. What efforts are being made to reach them and to offer them an off-ramp or an outlet or help?
Well, it started with the sign, right? On the sign, if you read it, is here's how you get help. And there's access to counselors, groups, sex economists, there's a lot of resources. So that's the first thing, resource. And then what EPIC is doing is that they're intercepting phone calls and meeting men where they're at and asking customers, why are you doing this? What's going on in your life? And intercepting it. So that's like the direct service. And then on the other avenues is that we're working with JSO. They've been doing a great job. They've been doing reverse stings. So instead of arresting the person being sold, they're arresting the buyer and holding them accountable, and making that very public. So there will be a consequence if you purchase someone, if you break the law. And that is starting to be more common. And ideally what we're looking for is a change in attitude and the survival model, right? Where the buyer is held accountable and the person being sold is offered services. That's the direction that we're heading to.
I want to make a couple of points, because we're getting some questions, and I know we have a call on the same topic. So I'll just kind of run through a couple of them. One, let me start at the beginning. We've got a Chris on Facebook saying, I truly believe legalizing sex work could be a solution. Adding, I'm not a fan of shaming sex work. Sex work is real work. There is a difference between sex work and sex trafficking. And we also have a call from someone in Mandarin who'd like to remain anonymous. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to echo that comment. I hear your guests saying things like all men who purchase are furthering trafficking, and that just simply isn't true. There are grown, consenting adults who willingly and enjoyingly participate in this. It is a profession. It is a much needed profession. There's clearly a market need for people who are doing it responsibly and are enjoying it, and I don't think they should be demonized, especially, even just consuming porn. If you say that's the first start of the journey, I mean, that's crazy. There are adults who engage in this world who should be able to, if all people participating are adult and consenting. And I'll take my answer off the air.
Before you pop off, just a quick question. Can you think of a good way to discern between someone who's being trafficked and someone who's doing it with volition and because they want to? If somebody,
I can in realms where it is legal. In places in the world and places in our country where it is legal, absolutely. And legalization tends to be the crux. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comment. I'll ask you to start, Kristin.
I mean, this is a huge topic, and I know I was like, I want to be careful to make sure we know what we agree on, right? That we agree that trafficking a person against their will and having sex, and this enters the complexity of trafficking, right? Trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to perform a sex act for profit, and in all the studies, it's 75 to 95% of women who end up in the commercial sex trade industry have been victims of sexual abuse, and it's perpetuated as normal, right? And I don't want to demonize anybody, right? And there's studies show that 90% of women want to leave the life, and they don't know how to leave the life. And there is this force, fraud, or coercion, right, is the definition of trafficking. And a lot of women that speak at Rethreaded is like, once money gets introduced, how do you determine coercion, right? Because they were vulnerable. And then the money is introduced, and is that the coercion, right? So it is a very, I don't want to demonize anyone, right? I want to bring both people life. And the solution is community and bringing people to wholeness.
Jamie, can I ask you to jump in on that and just talk a little bit about what you hear and have seen, and when it comes to being voluntary in the life, being somebody that is a willing participant, to the point of our commenter, there are people choosing to do this. It is a choice that they should be allowed to make, in her perspective, as a consenting adult.
Yeah, this isn't a new idea or a new conversation. It's definitely something that's been happening in and around the anti-trafficking movement for quite some time. I think, one thing to consider is kind of going back to, this is not something that happens in isolation between, two consenting adults, or, someone who's not consenting and someone who is. This is something that is happening at a societal level. And so the demand for sex is so great that there are not enough people who would willingly engage in sex work in a consenting, empowering way to fulfill that demand. So what happens is the most vulnerable people in our society end up getting wrapped up in this. And when you think about the most vulnerable, we start talking about, children, kids in foster care. And so that's one thing to consider, is this isn't an isolated thing between two consenting adults. This is a massive industry that there's just not enough consenting people to fill the demand. So therefore people are going to be harmed. The other thing is, I was on a New York Times podcast a few years ago and was having a conversation with a sex worker. And our point of commonality that we got to was that she left a career, got into sex work. This is something that she wanted to do, something she found empowering, and now she's in a place where if she wants to leave that line of work, that's really difficult. And so what happens is, even if people go into this in a consented way and you take away the concept of constrained choice and all of that, they have a really difficult time leaving that industry because of the way it's stigmatized. And so, the final thing I'll speak on too is this idea of it being decriminalized or legalized. In those cities, in the United States and, in the countries across the world where this is legalized or decriminalized, we are still finding high levels of trafficking happening. And even the people who are, quote unquote, the consenting adults in a lot of these situations, are people who are vulnerable, who have migrated from other countries and are being swept up. So once again, kind of going into this idea that In a perfect and ideal world, sure, we can talk about two consenting adults and, what they do behind closed doors. But that's not the world that we live in. We live in a world that is full of exploitation and violence.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about efforts to stem sex trafficking by dampening demand. If you have questions or comments, you can join our conversation at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find other ways to connect with us. We've got a call from Shamari in Southwest Jacksonville. Good morning, Shamari. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ann. I'm so glad you guys are tackling this topic. It's so important. I just got a couple things, if I may. So I am from here. I live here, but for a time I did live in Atlanta about 15 years ago, and I was a lobbyist. And I worked with the state legislature to pass the bill, which put the plaques in the hotels and throughout the airport that mention sex trafficking, and if you're a victim, go through these steps, or if you notice somebody. So that was great work we did. While we were doing that work, we learned so much about sex trafficking, and we learned that the people that work at the massage parlors are pretty much slaves. So and so through that, and as they're talking about EPIC and how do you quell the demand, you have to have honest conversations. And so one conversation I had with some of my circle of friends that were men that I knew that went to those parlors was I had to educate them and tell them that those people are slaves, and I can't, and if you're going to continue to go to these places, we can't be friends. But my next thing is, these numbers, I may have missed it, but these numbers just don't seem right to me, because in this market, we have one professional team. But in a market like Miami, they have baseball, professional basketball, and professional football. And they have strip clubs that are open 24 hours. There's at least one that's open like almost 24 hours. So these numbers don't seem right to me in terms of the market. And maybe you spoke to it. I just wish you could clarify that a little bit more for me, because as I think about why men are going down to Miami to rent Lamborghinis and Bentleys, I mean, come on. We don't even have those types of car rentals here. The next thing is, during the Super Bowl, when we had the Super Bowl here in Jacksonville, there was a guy that came in from a radio station in New York, and one comment that he made was, Jacksonville will never get another Super Bowl because they won't accept the underbelly that comes with professional sports. And so when we're putting the types of dollars into the stadium and to upgrading that corridor over there, what do you think is going to happen? If we're trying to grow the entertainment complex here, how are we going to decrease the sex trafficking?
Gotcha. Shamari, thanks for your comment and sort of your informed perspective there. I mean, the first question about the numbers and how we're not talking necessarily about Jacksonville as being the capital of sex trafficking. That is not the case. This is in terms of the ads or the solicitations that we're seeing.
Yeah.
But it is the intersection of a lot of travel and traffic here. And you also have a map that sort of shows the hot spots in this area in terms of hotels and motels that are troubled, and we're showing that on our screen. But what is it about Jacksonville? I mean, how does it compare to other places?
We're ranked third in the state for reported cases of human trafficking.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to clarify, the data is very new. This is the first year that they have data.
Which is kind of crazy.
Which is crazy. But it was only illegal 20 years ago. So it's just getting a definition. So now I think that 5 years out, we'll have a better answer for you.
What about Shamari's question about, as we have a world-class stadium coming, is there anything that's happening? Are there conversations that are happening about what happens when we get another Super Bowl, or just kind of having a more dynamic place for people to go to games?
There's a group of us, Jamie's in it, we're the Northeast Florida Human Trafficking Coalition's in it, and we're talking about how do we make a world-class model to disrupt human trafficking in Jacksonville. And that includes
is the team a part of that?
The team has been supportive, right? But really it's the current administration, the nonprofits, JSO, I mean, all working together collaboratively. Like when Jamie said, this is a community issue. So like the sports teams can't solve it, right? It's going to be us solving it and creating the best survivor exit strategy, right? To get women to get to survivors out of the life as quickly and safely as possible to services? And how do we make it as difficult as possible for sex buying to happen? And if we could do those two things in our city, we could have a model that creates a safe place for everybody. And I love, that's a great question. As we grow in entertainment, yeah, we have to ask the question, right? How are we going to do this? Because that's a reality. And I love that you're asking that.
Yeah.
Do we need to have an underbelly? Can everyone address the underbelly? Can we raise ourselves up as respecting other people and looking at the world from the top?
I want to ask you, because of the outreach you do, Ruby, and you come into contact with a lot of people and young people as well, there are technological changes that are making this more difficult, I would say, not only in terms of enforcement and tracking, because a lot of it can happen behind the screen, as it were, but also the idea of people engaging voluntarily, and whether that's people who are, posting videos and things of themselves or creating something like an OnlyFans site at a very young age. And
Which
that's something that happens.
Supposed to be empowering to that person, but it can turn dark. And so you just don't know. You just don't know. And I tell all the kids that I talk to that, number one, you might be thinking that you viewing pornography affects no one but yourself, but you don't know the level of consent that the actor or actress in that video has given, because a lot of our victims have said they were forced to make some kind of videos and contribute to a pornography site somewhere, or that the trafficker will download it and just share it among other places. The other thing is online enticement and sextortion. I tell the kids, if you have a text of anything, any body part that's supposed to be under a bathing suit, you don't want to put that out there, because that is going to stay in cyberspace forever, and someone can take a screenshot, and then that goes to different underbelly places.
Sure. But I mean, the age, Jamie, of AI has made sextortion more complicated too, because images and videos can be created even without someone's consent that appear to be, them engaging in something that they wouldn't want out there. And so that can also create additional pathways for exploitation or extortion.
Yeah, it always seems like technology is one step ahead of us. And, with the work that I do, it's always been, traffickers and, predators are using technology in a way to exploit and, harm people. And so the question now becomes, like, as technology continues to evolve, is how do we use these same platforms to go against it? And so an example is like social media, creating digital outreach campaigns, creating really content-rich websites where, victims and survivors can go to connect with resources or have a better understanding of their experience. And now, the conversation we're going to be having next is how do we use AI to combat some of these things. And, I think there's been some legislation that's been passed, the Take It Down Act. That's really great, where we're going to be able to go identify and find these digital abuse materials and be able to hold people accountable and get those images and videos offline so they stop harming victims. But I agree, with deep fakes and just even what's available to the general public right now, and where people are taking that as far as, having an image of a person and then, requesting, the prompt being, have this person undress or whatever it is. We have to be aware of these things and start thinking of how we're going to counteract.
And can I just jump in and say, a minor does not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion, either for sex or labor trafficking.
Kristin, I want to ask you, you talked about working with the administration, and in terms of the Take It Down Act, one of the big advocates behind that was our former mayor, because his daughter was a victim of that.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you're seeing, because of sort of the omnipresence of this victims are not obviously aligned with any political party. This is a universal problem. what has that particular fact of, that localized crime that happened to the child of a very prominent person been helpful at all to get the message out? Or are you seeing, more sort of bipartisan interest in the issue?
This is a bipartisan issue. And since Rethreaded's inception, every what am I trying to say? Every cabinet, nope. Help me. Administration has been supportive, and every administration keeps doing more and more and more. As we have more knowledge of how it's happening and what's happening, each administration has supported the work more and more. And that makes a huge difference because that helps change the culture of the city. That helps move things along. That helps move legislation along. It creates a community that can bring the change about that we need to see.
All right. I want to take a quick call from Tiffany downtown. Tiffany, go ahead.
Yes, hi. This question is actually for Ruby. You were speaking briefly about some of the teens and some of the online vulnerabilities for families that find themselves in some of these horrors, but it kind of escalated to the point where they now have to get authorities involved. What resources are out there for families to be able to really help their teens when they find things on the phone and it's been happening for not just months but for years? Are there any resources that families can tap into where they can get some help for both themselves as the parent and for that child?
Yes, the Northeast Florida Human Trafficking Coalition has a whole page of resources that we put out at events and take to all table events. But National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has wonderful resources on their website. A website called Fight the New Drug is all about anti-pornography and how to teach to your kids. Every post that I make says talk to your kids. Tell them what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Tell them not to talk to strangers online. If you don't know a person in person and can touch that person, they are not your friend. And even if it says, "Oh, I'm a friend of Ruby's," she's not your friend.
We're going to have to leave it there. Ruby Peters, Kristin Keen, Jamie Roseland via video. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we talk to the founders of Jacksonville's first ever brick and mortar improv comedy club. Welcome back. Well, some comics work on their material for months or even years before bringing it to the stage. My next guests don't have that luxury. Alex and Madeline Grindelin have built their careers as the city's first ever brick and mortar comedy club, doing improv on the relentlessly fast-paced craft. Here to talk about it, we're joined by Alex and Madeline. So first of all, improv is kind of how you met. Was it on stage? Can you remember? Was it love at first sketch? How did you guys connect in the first place?
Yeah, it's funny. So we met in Seattle, actually at Alex ran a different comedy club in Seattle, and we met at one of his competing comedy clubs at the very first improv audition he ever did, even though he'd been doing improv for 15 years at that point, and the very first improv audition I'd ever done, and I had been doing it for 15 minutes.
And what is the disparity between somebody who's been doing it a long, long time and somebody who's just starting? And what, Alex, is sort of the obligation when you are an experienced improver to help somebody who's kind of just starting out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in terms of the disparity, I think improv is like any muscle. It would be the same disparity as somebody who's been lifting weights for a long time and somebody who hasn't. It's anybody can get better at it. That's why we teach improv classes, and sometimes people think, "Oh, I'm not the funny person. I can't get better at that." It's like, no, you can. You can. And our main teacher, who's one of my best friends in the world, who I've known since I was 16 years old, he's a former Marine. And he's got a very effective teaching strategy. He's got,
but it's not scary. It's not scary. Don't make it sound scary.
He's the sweetest Marine you'll ever meet.
It's true.
So you're like kind of a spotter. I mean, if you've got all this muscle memory to do it, and
Mhm.
she comes along, so how are you? What are you doing? How are you assisting? How do you help?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things about improv is it is such a collaborative type of comedy, and so we always say make your partner look good. In fact, that's when we teach workshops and stuff. The way you get people to be not self-conscious is you teach them to be conscious of their partner. So like you can't be conscious of just yourself if you're thinking, I want to make the other person on stage with me look awesome today. It's a way to get it out of your head.
You came here in about 2020, 21, and this club has been now running for a couple of years. What is the value of having like a permanent home for an improv comedy club?
Well, it's huge, I would say, because I ran the Comedy Sports that's in Seattle. I ran it for 9 years, and I started that one very much from the ground up. We started performing at literally an underground theater that had no signage. People didn't know what was there.
What, at midnight, right, or 10 p.m.?
Yeah, we had our schedule was crazy because we were not the only group performing at that theater, and so our shows were like, hey, come see us this Friday at 8, and then we don't have any shows next weekend, and then the next weekend we have a show at Saturday at 10:30 p.m. And then it was just hard to gain traction with an audience that way. And so, but when I made the leap the first time to get a brick and mortar venue, it's like, oh, this is what people need. You need to say, look, we're here every single Friday and Saturday, 7 o'clock and 9:30.
And so your location now is on Mayport Road, and you guys are there every Friday and Saturday doing these shows. When it comes to translating some of these skills, because I know that you do some training for businesses, you offer an opportunity for people who want to do some out of the workplace and maybe some non-traditional team building exercises. And I'm curious about that point that you make, making your partner look good, because that is something that translates into the workplace when you are able to not necessarily try to claim credit for things, but you're able to sort of spread that or share it. And it does have some connectivity to improv comedy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, Alex and then Dave, who we were mentioning earlier, have been teaching those team buildings forever. And I've been in the past 5 years lucky enough to get to be part of it. And I think one of the things I've observed when you get a team together is that collaboration, that collaborative spirit really applies in the workplace, because you're teaching them to focus, just like we do in improv, on their coworkers instead of themselves, right? If you're listening to understand rather than listening to speak, that's a huge skill in the workplace. People are so in meetings, they're thinking, what am I going to say next? What am I going to do to impress the CEO? What am I going to do to impress the boss? Whereas they could just be listening to their coworkers saying, wow, she made a great point. And I actually heard her this time because we worked together. It was a collaboration. Sort of learning how to repeat what they've heard, or to show that they're actually listening and not just waiting to say the next thing. Exactly.
And so when people are learning improv, they also have to really be vulnerable. And that, I think, is hard for a lot of people, for most people, I think, instinctively, right? So I'm guessing you didn't wake up one day and just automatically say, like, I'm comfortable putting myself on stage and possibly looking like a fool. So how do you build that? Is it a callus that you're building, or is it a greater vulnerability?
So I would say a lot of the improv exercises we do are, you have your class of, say, 16 people, and we do a lot of exercises that are fun and impossible to succeed at. And the what that does is it trains your brain to go, oh, it can be fun to fail in front of people. And that's, an improv show is that. It's like you're the clown essentially getting up on stage and putting yourself in situations where you're going to look like a fool in front of people, and then they applaud you for it, which is not a normal thing.
And instead of worrying about your mistake, you're looking at people amplifying the mistake that you made and making it even more awesome, right? Everybody's like, that was the silliest, dumbest mistake I've ever seen, and I loved it.
Yeah, I've heard it said that most people walk through their lives avoiding mistakes. Improvisers are chomping at the bit for the next one.
Yeah. Well, improv comedy is great fun to watch, and I wish we had a little more time to talk about it. But if people want to check you out, or if they want to learn more about, doing something with their workplace or their coworkers, what's the best way to get in touch, and where can they see your shows?
Yeah, so we're every single Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. and 9:30. We're 2292 Mayport Road. Firstcoastcomedy.com is where folks can buy tickets. That's where they can sign up for classes. They can learn about our corporate trainings, team buildings. We have our next class starts up on March 25th. And we do a variety of different shows. February 6th is a really special show. People can go to our calendar and learn about the whole variety of shows that we have.
All right.
And then Instagram and our YouTube channel, we live stream our early show every single Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. So if you subscribe to our YouTube, you can leave suggestions in the chat. We might use them in the live show.
Excellent. All right. Well, Madeline, Alex, Grindelin, very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Up next, our resident spaceman tells us about the age of sunlight when he touches down for his monthly visit.
Scenic Jacksonville presents the Great Cities Symposium on February 5th. Victor Dover, city builder and town planner, shares how he has transformed cities, streets, and neighborhoods through urban design across the U.S. Tickets available at scenicjacksonville.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
On the next Fresh Air, Brooke Neville was a producer at Today working with Matt Lauer when she says he sexually assaulted her. In her new memoir, Unspeakable Things, she writes about that, the consequences of coming forward, and how sexual assault has been covered by the media. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
In the 2025 budget bill, Congress created the $50 billion Rural Health Fund to help struggling hospitals, doctors, and patients in rural America. It might seem like a lot, but it's only a third of the amount of funding that those same places will lose due to massive Medicaid cuts in that same budget bill. So what will it take to keep rural healthcare afloat? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Nearly 1 year ago, an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided midair with a commercial jet on approach into Washington, D.C., killing 67 people. In a new report, the National Transportation Safety Board calls the accident 100% preventable. Are we doing enough to keep our skies safe? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Just how old is the sunlight that you saw at sunrise this morning? Well, the answer is a lot more complicated than you might think. And here to talk about it is Eddie Whistler, Director of Planetarium and Outreach at the Museum of Science and History, and our resident spaceman, Eddie.
And it's every month. I love coming out here to talk something cool like this.
Happy January.
Happy January. It felt cool. Sunlight is warm.
But it was cool this morning.
It was cool this morning. And the story of the travel of the light from the sun is also very cool.
So I'm going to push back because we all know that the speed of light is very, very fast.
Yes.
And so how long does it actually take sunlight to get from the surface of the sun to the surface of the earth? Not that long.
The sun is 8 light minutes away.
Okay.
8
light minutes.
Yeah. So that's a distance. The moon is 1.3 light seconds away. So shine a laser, high power, on the surface of the moon. It takes 1.3 seconds for the light to get to us. The sun is 8 light minutes away, but that betrays a much deeper story, because where would you say that light from the sun is actually generated? Like, where's the engine of the sun?
Well, I'm guessing it's somewhere inside.
Inside, in its core. That's where all the pressure is. That's where stuff is being pressed together. And in this nuclear fusion that takes place in the core, that's where photons of light are generated. You with me?
So far.
And so we imagine that light generated in the core gets to the surface and then shoots out towards the earth. And that's true. And it takes 8 light minutes to do that. So how long does it take to get from the core to the surface? The short answer is anywhere from tens of thousands of years to millions of years.
Wow.
And the reason is because things are just so packed dense. In space, it's empty. It's like throwing a billiard ball through a warehouse. Like, there's nothing that's going to interact with that billiard ball. But if you pack a warehouse with other nearby objects, that billiard ball is going to ping around all over the place and
Inside
take random walks.
The
right?
Amazon warehouse, it's going to be a harder journey to get
It's
out.
harder journey to get out. One of the cool ways to think about it is like a whisper trying to make, or a rumor making its way out of a football stadium at halftime, right?
Wow.
Like, you know, it can interact with the other people around, but it takes a while for that rumor to make its way out. And so that's how it goes. And so it's a statistical calculation that you have to make, one of probability. It interacts with nearby other matter, and then it is re-emitted in a completely random other direction, and then quickly absorbed by another thing, and then re-emitted in a different direction.
So it's
and
like pinging around inside this giant ball of whatever the sun is.
Yes.
Not fire, but something else.
And
Plasma. I don't know.
Plasma, dense material.
Okay.
Until it makes it to less dense material layers on the out.
So
and then
how long have we known that this is how light is transmitted from the sun to where we are?
Oh, goodness. So I don't know the history of putting this, practically, well, I suppose it could have happened little at a time in terms of discoveries that you make about light and about the density of matter and so on and so forth, or it is all put together by one person, one brain. The process of us learning about this little tidbit could be any of the ways that science is discovered. And we know, I just don't know.
And so colloquially, how do people know about this process? I mean, this is the kind of thing that you teach when you go around to schools and you're teaching young minds about interesting things.
Yeah, because it's exactly that. These are the low-hanging fruit that like really open up your brain to think about things. When you see the starlight that lights up our daytime sky, we know that comes from the sun.
Okay.
Exactly. Call sunlight starlight and open up the blinds in the morning and let in a little bit of starshine.
Uh-huh.
Get starburn next time you go to the beach. But if you don't want that injury from the high energy light of the nearby star, then you can, spread on a little star screen on your skin. The sun is a star, and that light that you see during the daytime is hundreds of thousands of years old on
Eddie,
average.
you're a star. So you're doing, while Mosh is closed, you're going around to different places and entertaining and educating people about things, all science. And so we learned this week that Mosh's opening might be delayed a little bit. Its groundbreaking is now going to be delayed from March until sometime in the fall. While that's happening, though, where are you going? And if people are interested in kind of hounding you or tracking you down to get some access to that weird brain of yours, how can they do that?
Yeah, I spill the weird brain out in presentations and inside of a mobile planetarium that go to people. And you can interact with our website in order to just like put in an inquiry. Eventually, you'll wind up talking to me, and we set up the details of the program that you might need at a school, or lots of work in this past year at retirement communities, visiting a lot of these different places where people are interested in setting up events where we can learn and have fun and enjoy the universe together. That's really what it's about.
Well, we always enjoy having you. Eddie Whistler, Director of Planetarium and Outreach at the Museum of Science and History. Thanks for being here.
I love it. Thank you.
And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you missed anything, you can find all of our past and current programs at firstcoastconnect.org. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. She's back. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Please join us Friday for our Week in Review. We're going to be talking about the downtown bar business, from extended hours to the closing of Intuition. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
FPL, where teams work to inspect, upgrade, and strengthen the grid. FPL, working for you every single day. Details at FPL.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.